Hey lads and lasses, I'm Catalystz, and you're tuned in to an epic Elden Ring Any Glitchless Speedrun World Record with a complete breakdown. In the Any Glitchless category, the runners strive to reach the credits in the shortest time possible, utilizing only minor tricks along the way. Today's run is performed by blanxz, a prolific Bloodborne and Demon Souls remake speedrunner, who spent considerable amount of time playing this Elden Ring category as well. He's also known as the Jon Snow of Souls speedrunning. I wonder why. But before we kick off this thrilling run, let's delve into what it takes to reach the credits in Elden Ring, so we can understand the theory behind the speedrun route. Starting from the end, our main objective is to defeat Elden Beast. To get there, we must release the Destined Death and venture into the Ringed Leyndell. To achieve this, we need to take down Maliketh. However, reaching Maliketh requires us to reach Farum Azula, which involves resting at the Forge of the Giants. To access the forge, we must first make our way through the mountaintops of the Giants, which become accessible only after slaying Morgoth in the capital. But to enter the capital, we need to defeat at least 2 Shardbearers and pay a visit to the Round Table Hold at minimum once. And that's basically it. Now, at the beginning of the game, there are 4 Shardbearers to choose from, allowing us to decide which 2 we'll target based on the time it would take to reach them. That's why in the earlier runs, the speedrunners relied on the Serpent Hunter as their weapon of choice, while taking down Rykard and Godric. However, things have evolved, and now we opt for the Bloodhound's Fang and eliminate Radahn and Godric. Quite a shift, isn't it? Even before the run officially begins, critical decisions are made during character creation. For our starting class, we go with the Samurai, thanks to their Uchigatana, a weapon that inflicts massive damage with its bleeding effect, and the Longbow, which lets us perform a nifty trick called Bow Cancel. I'll explain that in a moment. As for the keepsake, we choose the Lance Between rune because it allows us to acquire the necessary crafting tools right from the start. Okay, let's begin. Right at the start of the run, inside the Chapel of Anticipation, we grab the finger item to enable our exit. Here's where a small trick comes into play. By blocking, we cancel out the item pickup animation and can start sprinting immediately after. Then, we unequip the arrows so that when we save and quit at the doors, there's no stand-up animation delay. Since the runs are timed using the in-game timer, it is sometimes faster to save and quit, then reload the save file, rather than wait for certain animations to complete. This ensures a fair competition because the timer doesn't run during load screens, preventing slower load times from putting anyone at a disadvantage. And here's a familiar sight for Elden Ring speedruns. Instead of fighting the first boss, we take a daring leap off a cliff, timing it just right to activate the fight before meeting our end. This warps us to the next location as soon as possible, saving precious seconds on the clock. One technique you will see blanxz employ throughout the run is repeatedly jumping with brief block inputs in between. That is not just because he's a bunny hop enjoyer, but it serves a purpose. When traversing flat ground or moving uphill, it's actually slightly faster than plain sprinting. The block input is crucial because simply spamming jumps would result in mini jumps after the initial one. By incorporating the block, we prevent this cooldown from occurring. Once the Lance Between rune is popped on the elevator, we make sure to take the first step Grace, to which we will come back not just once, but multiple times throughout the run. However, there's a peculiar way of doing it. Similar to the doors, we save and quit to cancel out the lighting animation. Normally, opening the menu during this process isn't possible, so we position ourselves facing away from the Grace, forcing the character to turn around before lighting it. This momentary turn allows us to open the menu, or even the map, and execute the save and quit. Right after that, when leaping away from Vare, we pull off a nifty trick called Bow Cancel that I already mentioned. By equipping the longbow in the right hand and two-handing it at a precise moment during the fall by pressing R1, we can completely bypass the landing animation. The timing for this trick varies for each drop, making it more challenging than it appears. It's important to note that a bow cancel doesn't prevent fall damage, it solely skips the landing animation. While doing this once may not seem like a big deal, skipping every landing animation throughout the run adds up, especially in a shorter category like Any Glitchless. As we make our way to the gate front, eager to acquire Torrent as quickly as possible, we encounter a friendly donkey-riding merchant named Kale. We pause to interact with him and purchase the crafting kit, enabling us to craft consumables on the move. While these items may not play a significant role in most playthroughs, they prove invaluable in certain fights during the speedrun, saving us a considerable amount of time, but we'll dive into that a bit later. After exchanging greetings with Melina and finally obtaining our trusty horse, it's time to delve into the major setup phase of the run. But before that, let me tell you about this absolute throne I've been gaming on made by Noble Chairs, the video sponsor. If you're looking for a chair to upgrade your setup, you may want to pay attention. I've now spent several months using this special Elden Ring Edition hero, so I'm 100% confident in my recommendation. First things first, comfort. This chair is extremely cozy thanks to its high quality materials. At first, the seat might feel a bit firm, but here's the secret: it remembers your shape. Over time, it becomes like a custom cushion, perfectly molding to your body. Just make sure not to become small overnight. Now let's talk convenience. Those armrests, they're super versatile. When I'm rocking a controller, I can easily move them out of the way. But when I'm spending hours editing, they give me the support I need. Need a breather? The hero's got your back. Literally. It leans back real nice, letting you kick back and relax. I don't use it all the time, but the option is there. Now the hero's secret weapon, the adjustable lumbar spine support. With this feature, you can mold the backrest to fit your spine perfectly. This way you don't have to worry about the backrest being too small or too big for your needs. Gotta be real for a second. The paddles for leaning and height adjustment, they can be a tad clunky. Maybe I messed up during assembly, who knows? But honestly, how often do you readjust these things anyways? Speaking of assembly, the only builds I put together are in video games, yet I was still able to build this chair in less than an hour, live on stream. Extremely easy. So, here's the deal. I was looking to get a proper chair for a long time and have always been skeptical of gaming style chairs. But the hero combines office quality with the gaming aesthetic and truly gives me the comfort I need to keep pushing for those records. Now, I won't sugarcoat it, the hero does come with a bit of a price tag, but it is an investment into a comfortable future that will last you many years. For me, it is worth every penny. If you want to check out this special version and feel like an Elden Lord yourself, you can find the link to it below the like button or in the pinned comment. Thank you again, Noble Chairs, for sponsoring this video. Elden Ring is truly an open world game, with most sources of power accessible without strict progression requirements. First, we head back to our previous location and make our way to the trap chest underneath Agil's Lake, which happens to be the fastest route to Caelid. Our main objective there is to collect 2 parts of the Dectus Medallion in order to reach the Altus Plateau and by extension Leyndell. There are 4 different ways to reach Leyndell: through the Volcano Manor after getting kidnapped in the Raya Lucaria Academy, via the teleporter in Deep-Root Depths, or by taking the Runestream Precipice in Liurnia, which is a fairly slow option. The final way is the Grand Lift of Dectus, located right beside the precipice, and is the fastest route for an any % run, using the Bloodhound's Fang. Although it requires the 2 medallion parts to activate, we can utilize Forts Faroth and Height, where they are located, to gather additional equipment that will help speed up the run. Heading toward the first fort, we pass through the town of Celia. Here, we encounter several braziers that need to be lit to undo a seal obstructing the northern part of Caelid, where Faroth is located. However, there's a neat parkour trick we can utilize. We first jump onto the railing by the seal and exploit Torrent's ability to turn midair with its second jump. This allows us to reach the branch above the railing, effectively bypassing the seal. Then, instead of taking the main lengthy path, we save time by climbing the cliff directly. Before proceeding to Faroth, we make a stop at the Church of the Plague. Resting here is essential for reasons apparent later, and also because at this point we're still trapped by the chest and need to rest in order to warp again. While seated, we take advantage of Melina's services and have her transport us to the Roundtable Hold. As mentioned earlier, Leyndell won't open until we visit the hub at least once. When we're done, we return to the Celia tunnel and pick up a Somber Smithing Stone +5 located nearby. All Elden Ring speedruns rely on a Somber type weapon as their primary choice. This is because upgrading a Somber weapon to its maximum level requires significantly fewer materials compared to a regular weapon. For example, reaching +3 on a regular weapon would necessitate 12 first level Smithing Stones, whereas a Somber weapon would only need 3, 1 for each level. With the Smithing Stone in hand, we gallop toward Fort Faroth. Here, we not only acquire the right half of the Dectus Medallion, but also pick up Rune and Radagon's Sword Seal. The Sword Seal is a talisman that provides an additional 5 stat points to Vigor, Endurance, Strength and Dexterity, but comes at the cost of increased damage taken by 15%. The Sword Seal is crucial because it allows us to meet the exact stat requirements to apply Golden Vow later on. Now, our next destination is Fort Height to obtain the second half of the Dectus Medallion. The most efficient route starts again from the first step. We make our way over Agil Lake and take the Grace north of it. North? This is south, Kata. Nice orientation skills, dude. To access the nearby Everjail down the line. It contains the boss that drops the primary weapon of choice for this run, the Bloodhound's Fang. Conveniently, there's another nomadic merchant near Fort Height who sells Saint Trina's arrows, known to put enemies to sleep by making them listen to Gideon. This will greatly assist us in a specific fight closer to the end of the run. Inside the fort, we gather several blood roses to craft blood grease, a useful item that can be applied to our weapons. We also find the cookbook containing the grease recipe. Finally, we obtain the left half of the medallion at the top and swiftly make our exit. With the full medallion in our possession, our next destination is Altus Plateau. We start from the Gatefront Grace and head north, lighting the Stormhill Shack Grace along the way for future use when we are mean and strong. To bypass Stormhill Castle, we take a small pathway alongside the cliff near the broken bridge leading to Liurnia. By performing a precise jump, we can land directly on the pathway and save time. To return to the lower levels, we execute a carefully planned drop. It's important to be cautious during this section to avoid taking unnecessary damage and potentially dying. In the Purified Ruins, we use a teleporter to reach Raya Lucaria. From there, we immediately turn back and take another teleporter towards Caria Manor. Our main objective is to visit Blacksmith Ichi, who can upgrade our weapons. However, since we are too poor and even lack a proper weapon at this point, we simply take the grace for future upgrades. Continuing our journey, we reach the Grand Lift by dropping to the Bellum Highway. Along the way, we encounter another merchant who sells valuable items. Remember the rune we obtained in Fort Faroth? It provides enough currency to purchase a rune arc and a composite bow from the merchant. The rune arc increases our HP by approximately 10% when activated, even without having any great runes. A modest increase to be sure, but it can be the difference between life and death on several bosses. The composite bow has a faster moveset compared to our current longbow, allowing us to shoot sleeping arrows more quickly. After activating the lift and arriving at Altus Plateau, we dash straight toward the capital. On the way, we collect 2 golden seeds which will provide extra charges for our healing flask. These charges will mainly be used to replenish our focus points rather than health. As we aim to reach Leyndell's ramparts, we encounter a big obstacle, the Draconic Tree Sentinel. We still lack a good weapon and levels, and therefore have no chance in a head-on fight. But what we have is a tasty cheese. We activate the boss fight and quickly hide behind the wall in a specific location on a rock before the Sentinel approaches. As the boss nears, we run towards the edge of the cliff, parry its jump attack and put it in a vulnerable state. A quick smack on the butt causes the Sentinel to stumble and fall to its demise. This grants us a generous reward of 50,000 runes and access to the rampart. These runes are crucial for purchasing Somber Smithing Stones 1 to 4 from Blacksmith Ichi, while still leaving enough for a level up. Returning to the Everjail where Bloodhound Knight Darivil resides, we level up our character. We allocate points to reach 15 Strength and 12 Faith, meeting the minimal requirements for the Golden Halberd, which we will acquire soon. Additionally, we invest 23 points in Dexterity since the Bloodhound's Fang scales with this attribute. We also use the Golden Seeds and assign 5 charges to the FP Flask. Before facing the boss, we craft and apply the blood grease to enhance the bleed buildup with the Uchigatana. The fight begins with blanxz setting up his position as Darivil takes a while to spawn. He initiates with an Unsheath R2 and an R1, followed by another Unsheath R2 that staggers the enemy. Instead of riposting, blanxz continues with another Unsheath attack to further build up the bleed. Then another R1 and a final Unsheath should be sufficient to defeat the boss. However, blanxz cannot perform an R1 on time, so he rolls to dodge an attack and counters with a roll R1. This triggers the bleed effect, staggers Darivil, and exposes him for a final Unsheath attack. As the night falls, we receive the Bloodhound's Fang, which we will promptly upgrade. Next, we return to the First Step Grace one last time to confront the first tree sentinel we encountered in Limgrave. It's as if we had some sort of vendetta against the sentinels who totally didn't bully the crap out of me on my first playthrough, no. Defeating this boss rewards us with the Golden Halberd, equipped with the Golden Bow Ash of War, which is what we're after. Obtaining the Golden Bow Ash is crucial, as it boosts our damage by over 10% while improving our overall defense as well. This upgrade enables us to employ more effective strategies in upcoming boss fights, which would otherwise be slower and less consistent. During this fight, you can also see the Fang's skill for the first time. Its first hit is a backflip with a potential dash follow-up. The dash itself provides invincibility frames, and both attacks deal substantial damage while building up bleed. Now that we are fully prepared, it is time to confront the chosen Shardbearers. We begin with Radahn, for whom we already have a grace in Caelid. To reach him as quickly as possible, we perform a Stake of Marika skip from the Church of the Plague. By precisely timing a double jump off the edge of the cliff, we bypass the kill planes below and die from fall damage inside Radahn's arena. This activates the Stake of Marika checkpoint, allowing us to warp to it and skip the need to traverse Redbane Castle. Hold your horses, I know what some of you are thinking. Kara, isn't that a glitch? Sure, this is an unintended consequence of a game mechanic and could be argued to be a glitch. However, what is and what isn't a glitch in the end is decided by the community, and it believes that Stake of Marika skips that do not skip any bosses simply cut down on the running time, of which the speedrun already has plenty. The fight against the Star Scourge begins with an unusual approach, running away from the boss. Once we distance ourselves enough, Radahn exits the game's draw distance and temporarily disappears. This causes him to stop shooting arrows and forces him to approach us instead, speeding up the actual start of the fight. We apply the blood grease and summon some assistance for additional damage. blanxz intentionally baits a long-range attack from Radahn, aiming to deal enough damage before he transitions to his Meteor Phase 2. By hammering at him during this attack, we surpass a health threshold that triggers a weapon buff animation. Understanding this mechanic, we maneuver to avoid the attack while continuing to strike him.
I had to make sure Okina wasn't gonna body block me there.
We utilize the invincibility frames provided by the Bloodhound's Fang skill to evade his gravity pull while staying in close proximity to bait out another follow-up attack. During this process, we accumulate enough poise damage to stagger the boss, providing an opportunity to finish him off before he transitions. With Radahn defeated, I must warn you that what follows is a brutal act of cold-blooded murder. Our friend Alexander has appeared due to the Redmane Festival triggered by our visit to Altus Plateau. The talisman he carries boosts our skill damage by 10%, a significant increase that justifies committing this atrocity. We now need to light the grace to exit the area and continue heading towards the second chosen shardbearer, Godric. Selecting Godric is a clear choice, since killing Rennala would require us to open and navigate the academy, while Rykard is completely out of the question far away in Volcano Manor. As mentioned earlier, we return to the Stormhill Shack now that we are mean and strong. It's a short trek to Stonewell Castle where we encounter Margit. Little does he know that we are now significantly overleveled. A charge attack, followed by the full skill, staggers him, allowing us to strike him with a series of fast attacks. As his health drops and he transitions to using his hammer, we comfortably execute another backflip, swiftly ending the fight. Who's foolish now, eh? Margit's defeat rewards us with a talisman pouch, enabling us to equip Alex's Warrior Jar Shard alongside the Source Seal. When it comes to Stormvale, it is much faster to disregard Gostok's advice and simply rush through the main gate. Along the way, we acquire a set of kukri for important extra utility later on. After skillfully avoiding all enemies, we enter the Godric fight, which also revolves around abusing a set phase transition. As the boss's health dwindles, he automatically staggers and initiates a transition. However, if the attack that brings him below the threshold also depletes his poise to 0, he will experience a regular stagger before transitioning. That way, we have an opportunity to deal a lot more damage than otherwise possible. With this opening attack, blanxz positions himself beneath it, leveraging the ground's shape to evade it. This skill here will trigger the transition, but also staggers the boss at the same time, allowing for a riposte that procs the bleed buildup and inflicts massive damage. More damage than we would have time for if he just transitioned regularly. Godric then meets his demise while standing up. Immediately after the kill, we save and quit to skip Godric's lengthy death monologue. Seriously, dude, you're dead. Could you please shut the f***? After loading in, as long as we stay within the area, the boss kill is still going to count. Since this marks the defeat of the second shardbearer, the Seal of Leyndell is finally open, allowing us to proceed to Morgoth and complete our best of 3 match with him. We return to the Rampart where we killed the Draconic Tree Sentinel and continue into the capital, taking the East Rampart Grace. To reach the bottom streets quickly, we perform a tricky jump towards an extended part of a wall. Timing is crucial as we delay the initial jump until we are already falling off the platform. By attacking midair, we make strafing possible and turn into the wall. After a simple drop on the rotunda, we descend to the main street, bypassing the need to navigate the rooftops and take an elevator. If you like that parkour, I have another one for you. Instead of scaling up the dead dragon's body in the center of Leyndell, we continue down the main road until we reach a broken bridge. Although the gap cannot be crossed, the ornaments on the right side can be stood on. However, the pillars prevent us from simply walking over, so we must perform several delayed jumps and strafe around the obstacles. This skip requires precise execution, but impressively, blanxz nails it on the first try. Falling during the attempt would necessitate an extremely quick save and quit to avoid death, as the death planes are positioned really high up. Luckily, this was not necessary. From the other side of the bridge, we ascend the massive tree branch and encounter the next boss, Spirit Godfrey, or Goldfrey, whichever you prefer. As with Darreville earlier, Spirit Godfrey takes some time to spawn, allowing us to throw a kukri at him for additional damage. He begins by throwing his axe, which blanxz strafes backwards to punish with the BHF skill while avoiding another attack with the dash. blanxz effortlessly jumps over a stomp AoE, creating another clean opening. Understanding the stagger timing perfectly, he performs another full L2 attack without concern for Godfrey's actions, leaving just enough stamina and time to riposte afterward. One final L2 attack concludes the fight. Now, to the reason we are here, Morgoth. The third and final shard bearer in this run operates similarly to how Godric did with the phase transition. After dealing enough damage at the start, Morgoth is likely to cast an AoE barrage of arrows, so blanxz knows exactly which attacks to choose. By staggering the boss when passing the threshold for the phase transition with the help of bleed damage, the transition is delayed. The sequence after the riposte requires extreme precision, as the next skill must be executed while avoiding any incoming attacks. As Morgoth takes damage and starts transitioning to his second phase, another bleed proc finishes him off just on time to prevent the transition. It's an amazingly well executed fight. At this stage, blanxz is aware that he is on a comfortable record pace, so the nerves must be starting to build up. Fortunately, a long running section to the mountaintops follows, allowing him to regain composure. After obtaining the rolled medallion from Melina to activate the ground lift leading to the mountaintops, we warp back to the East Capital Rampart, and once again performed the tricky jump to reach the streets. However, this time we head towards the eastern side. Demonstrating the challenge of this jump is blanxz hitting its second try this time around. Still, it's not the biggest time loss. Along the way, we collect several somber smithing stones as the game basically throws them at us. We find the +6 stone in Lanedale, as well as the exalted flesh on the way, which boosts our physical attack power by 20% for 30 seconds after use. The elevator here presents an ideal opportunity to activate the purchased rune arc without wasting any time. In the Forbidden Lands, we obtain a Somber Stone +7 alongside a Freezing Grease located by the ground lift of Roll. This will come in handy for a particularly talkative boss later on. Upon reaching the mountaintops, we slay a giant beetle to acquire Somber Smithing Stone +8 and then take the Ancient Snow Valley Ruins Grace, allowing us to return to Ichi and upgrade our weapon from +5 to +8. Now it's time to head straight to the Fire Giants, but there are 3 different ways to do so. The slowest option is to run around the freezing lake, as most players probably did during their casual playthroughs. Another approach involves using the invisible bridge that spans the ravine and leads to Heretical Rise, one of the puzzle towers. However, the fastest option involves a small skip around the freezing lake, using some conveniently placed rocks. That's what we'll go for in this run. We first quit out by the cliff to de-aggro the Dragon Borealis, since reloading the game resets enemies to their initial positions. Then, we run up the cliff at a specific angle to avoid falling off and carefully aim our first jump into the wall, while executing a perfect 90-degree turn to the right with the second jump. This allows us to reach the upper parts without having to go further around. As for the Fire Giant, he also transitions between 2 phases, but his transition works differently than what we have seen so far. Once a specific HP threshold is reached, a cutscene immediately triggers the start of the second phase without any additional animations. However, we can exploit the poise build up on the boss at the end of phase 1, which carries over to phase 2. This enables us to stagger the boss much earlier in the second part of the fight compared to starting from 0 poise damage. blanxz begins by breaking the Fire Giant's bracelet to expose his weak spot, which becomes the primary target to deal extra damage. Just as the boss is about to roll away, a charged R2 attack builds up enough stagger. Another full skill and a charged R2 are sufficient to trigger the transition. Immediately after the cutscene, blanxz replenishes his mana and throws a cookie at the boss to prevent his poise from depleting. The second phase always starts with a Firestorm attack, so blanxz safely lands a charged attack followed by a skill. The second part of the skill is aimed at the head for increased damage. The boss staggers due to the previously built poise, and another weak spot becomes exposed. The eye. The very last attack procs bleed for massive damage, flawlessly finishing the fight. Since Melina yeeted herself into the forge, we get transported to Far Missoula. Standing between us and Malekith is just one other boss fight, but it would be incredibly challenging without the tools we have previously gathered, the Godskin duo. Conveniently, there's a Somber +9 on the way, which we obviously don't say no to. We immediately upgrade the Bloodhound's Fang to +9, which will be crucial to have enough damage for the remaining boss fights. The Godskin duo fight starts with blanxz using the composite bow with its fast moveset to hit the noble, and then the apostle with Saint Trina's sleeping arrows. Each Godskin needs to be hit 3 times, after which they fall asleep for a full 60 seconds. This gives blanxz plenty of time to buff up with the golden wow and the previously picked up exalted flesh, as well as perform the damage setup. In this fight, the bosses share a cumulative health bar. You see, in From Software games, it is possible to attack enemies and deal damage to them even after they already died. Since their health bar is empty, it doesn't really lead to anything. But here, after killing one individual, we can keep hitting its corpse and deal damage to the shared health bar. This allows us to finish the fight without spawning any additional god skins besides the first two. It works exactly like the Four Kings fight in Dark Souls 1, for example. The goal here is to deal as much damage as possible before the boss staggers. The subsequent riposte can then be followed by an L2 for the biggest possible overkill. The same strategy is utilized on the Apostle, except blanxz goes for a backstab instead of a riposte, as a riposte wouldn't give him enough time to perform a full L2 before the corpse despawned. At this point, you might say that there's still another boss fight between us and Maliketh, which are those freaking birds, man. And I would agree, but we have an awesome skip to completely bypass their BS. We drop around this round elevator and take it up to the top of the tower. Instead of continuing down to the bridge, we can land on a ledge whose collision extends far enough to stand on. Then, we jump around the pillars and make it over to a ladder that leads directly to the Great Bridge before Maliketh. These are the best kind of skips. They look cool, save time, and also avoid annoying parts of the game. Okay, so Maliketh is, in principle, very similar to the Fire Giant, because he has the same type of phase transition. We want him to open with a running attack so that we can charge in R2 and trade with him. This way, he's going to do a follow-up, which we can avoid and punish with our skill to stagger. After the riposte, an L2's first part builds up stagger and finishes the first phase. Depending on the positioning, it is possible to have a consistent opening at the second phase. We exploit it to stagger the pup with a charge attack and a full skill. Another quick L2 after the riposte finishes the fight. It is then slightly quicker to quit out as soon as the boss dies, as it will immediately trigger the automatic teleport to the Ashen Capital, which we would otherwise have to wait for. Now, it's a pretty straight line to the end, but perhaps the most execution-heavy fight is right ahead of us. Believe it or not, that fight is Gideon. Any NPC fight in From Software games is annoying, but Gideon's unlimited spam of abilities might just take the throne in Elden Ring. That's why we try our best to prevent him from ever reaching that stage. To deal the most damage in the least amount of time, we apply the frost grease obtained in the Forbidden Lands. Gideon's big mistake is that he starts the fight by talking. A lot. We begin by hitting him with the dash follow-up of our skill, as it deals more damage than the first part. Connecting with only one attack allows us to perform a riposte since it doesn't stop the monologue. Now, this is extremely important. We run away at a super specific angle and L2 backwards in such a direction that Gideon will stand up facing away from us and consistently eat the follow-up L2. Combined with the frost and bleed procs, we do massive damage to finish the fight. This was clean and fast, but I assure you that blanxz made it seem way easier than it really is. Before the final two fights, we spend our remaining runes on the last level up, getting some vigor as well as pumping strength and dexterity for additional power. Godfrey is yet again a two-phase boss, with poise build-up that can be carried over between the phases. Overall, the first phase has similar attacks as the spirit version, except he follows them up more often, which is good because those follow-ups can be strafed and heavily punished. On the first entry, the opener is always guaranteed as it's connected to the cutscene, so we strafe it and respond with a charge attack. Then we try to stagger him without dealing too much or too little damage, so that enough poise can be built up before entering the second phase. Notice the R1 before the riposte. This is to put the boss at low enough health for a phase transition to occur before another stagger, since poise is reset with a riposte. This way, our second hit on Horaloo will cause a stagger. He always opens this phase with a grab, so we walk away and punish with a full L2, breaking his ports. After the riposte, an R1 and an L2 finish the job as he stands up and starts screaming. Only one more double boss fight stands between blanxz and the world record. For everyone's favorite redhead, the most random part of the fight is the start, because he later has two exploitable scripted sequences, a big jump and several AoE slams at the end. The start isn't the fastest possible, but blanxz did the best with what he had. We staggered Radagon before his jump, so we know what's coming next and can plan our attacks accordingly to deal enough damage to force out a power-up with the big AoE. These slumps can be jumped over and punished before the last one connects, and L2 finishes the fight. Ahead of Elden Beast, there is just enough time to rebuff and fully refill our resources. If the start of Radagon's fight was random, Elden Beast is on another level. It will always open with a big fire attack landing in front of it, so blanxz quickly repositions to its side and starts hammering at it. Just as the boss tries to swim away, a precisely timed L2 connects in the nick of time and staggers it out of the animation. Big damage is dealt while Elden Beast is on the ground, and then a riposte is performed. What happens next relies purely on luck. The worst case would be a swim away into the big circle attack, during which the boss cannot be reached at all, losing precious time and the record. Fortunately, the beast decided to continue with a melee attack, which blanxz masterfully avoids. Utilizing the invincibility of the dash, he punishes it perfectly. While the boss goes for another favorable attack, blanxz finishes it before anything has a chance to connect.
Let's fucking go, baby! Holy shit!
After a quick quit out to speed up the teleport to the stone platform, blanxz has just beaten the previous world record by a full 17 seconds.
Fucking world record, baby! Let's fucking go, dude! Stop 5630! No fucking way! No fucking way! Holy shit! No fucking way! Holy shit! Stop 5630! That's it! That's the end! The category is dead! That's where it ends! There's no fucking way! Holy shit! No way, dude!
An extremely impressive speedrun that I hope you enjoyed watching as much as I enjoyed covering. A big shout out to blanxz for allowing me to use his run, and congratulations on his hard effort paying off. But as is often the case with speedrunning, where one chapter ends, another one begins. While there were minimal time losses during this run, some new optimizations have already been developed since it was achieved. There are now different level ups, and the Exalted Flesh is no longer needed on Godskin Duo. Magic Grease is also picked up and used alongside the flesh on Elden Beast to ensure a consistent one cycle. There will probably also come a point where the composite bow and the rune arc are unnecessary, so the nomadic merchant by Bellum Highway may be skipped, along with the rune from Fort Pharaoh. These are not massive changes, but in a tightly routed category such as any % glitchless, any potential second of time save can play a huge difference. Case in point is the fact that the French speedrunner Chemist has recently tied blanxz's record using these newer strategies, and just a few days ago as I was working on this video, Nuclear Pasta Tom achieved his first ever world record with a time of 56 minutes and 10 seconds. I'm sure the fierce competition will push the category to even lower times and maybe even to breakthroughs I could showcase to you guys. Anyways, thanks a lot for watching the video if you made it this far, and consider subscribing for more. Finally, as always, have a great day.
Oh my god.